This is OFN Today on the Orlads Football Network as we talk Indianapolis Colts football. Phillip Rivers, gone. And that means there's going to be a new sheriff in town for a third consecutive year. Actually, is it going to be 4 consecutive years? 4 consecutive years, right, Jake? A quarterback?
Yeah.
That's right.
2017 was Jacoby, and then Andrew Luck, and then Jacoby again, and then Phillip Rivers.
Well, it's 4 different quarterbacks, five different years, 5 straight years of a different.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's getting confusing, but one of these seasons the Colts have got to find a young quarterback, and we'll talk more about that and a whole lot else, of course, regarding what's going on with the Indianapolis Colts as we head into the offseason. Only 2 teams left. The rest of the teams in the NFL are already thinking about free agency and the draft. The Senior Bowl is taking place, so this is a week. It's very quiet, though. It's just eerie. And you usually get the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, the Combine. It's like the Senior Bowl just like came out of nowhere. It's like, I didn't even realize the Senior Bowl is this week.
Yeah, it really did, and it's that's something I'm used to writing about and putting together a list of watch these guys, and I haven't done that this year. It just came out of nowhere, just like you said.
Yep. All right. So before we talk off season, let's wrap up the 2020 season for the Colts. So I was going to ask you success or failure, but I think I know the answer to that question.
Honestly, yeah, it's considering they went 7-9 the year before. I think you've got to consider 2020 a general success. I mean, of course, they didn't. Their goal every year is to get to the Super Bowl, and Chris Ballard said, of course, some years are more realistic than others, but they genuinely thought they had a chance in 2020. So by their standards, it was not a success. But I think when you really look at expectations, given everything they did, I think it was a success. They the 2 main areas they upgraded quarterback and their 3 technique defensive tackle. Of course, quarterback is the most important position on an offense and football team in general. They successfully upgraded that, going from Jacoby Brissett to Phillip Rivers. They showed Phillip Rivers wasn't toast. He threw 20 interceptions or whatever in 2019. Came back and had a really good, really efficient season, high completion percentage, really good yards per attempt. I think it was 24 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. So he really fit well with the Colts offense. And then on their defense, the 3 technique defensive tackle is the most important position in their eyes. They went and traded the 13th overall pick for DeForest Buckner, and he had the greatest season of his career to this point.
What a trade.
Yeah, and he was already considered a top 5 defensive tackle in the NFL, so they hit that out of the park as well. Looks like another pretty good draft class. So long term, I think it looks pretty good for them. It was a successful season overall. I think one can be too disappointed with what happened.
Yeah, I think that the only thing where you would say it wasn't a success is just in Phillip Rivers. If you look at it from his point of view, he came here. He knew his days were numbered. Obviously, he's retired now, so he didn't come here to play a playoff game. Came here to try to win a Super Bowl, so it didn't work out there. But and it's not like Phillip Rivers is a young quarterback, and now he's going to be around for a while. They'll pick up where they left off last year. So that's the only thing where you say, was it really the type of successful season that the franchise wanted? And like you said, you want to win the Super Bowl. I think, and you hear the coach speak, the general manager speak, oh, we want to win the Super Bowl every year, that kind of thing. But only so many organizations can do that. And I think the Colts were one of them. I think they seriously had the talent to win a championship, and they just couldn't get it done. So now the big next step is finding that quarterback. And that's going to be tricky. We'll get into that. But let's kind of put to bed Phillip Rivers, and what did he do that, as far as a leader, what did Phillip Rivers do? What did he leave behind for the rest of his team moving forward?
Yeah, so you made a great point. You sign a guy like Phillip Rivers to a roster like this because you think that is going to get you over the hump and get you to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, but it definitely wasn't the quarterback play that held them back. He's retired now, of course, but what you're talking about, what he leaves with them, he's one of those guys. It kind of reminds me of Frank Gore when Frank Gore was here. Just the work ethic and not worrying about yourself at all. You're putting the team first. You know, you're taking care of your body, your preparation. I think one thing that I kind of think about. So the Colts drafted Jacob Eason in the 4th round, right? That's not a real early investment in a quarterback, but not so late where you can just discard them and think, they're going to be a camp body and then they're out of there.
That's true.
Putting a guy like Eason around someone like Phillip Rivers, that will really give him an edge, and it'll tell the Colts a lot if he's got what it takes to be a quarterback off the field, behind the scenes, and film study in the quarterback room and things like that. Because if you can't pick up information and you can't take the example that Phillip Rivers led by and, use that moving forward and be a pro, that's a problem. So that's one big area where I think would be Jacob Eason's development. Aside from just the energy and the work ethic, he made guys around him smarter.
And there's one veteran quarterback that was signed for a year and is now retired. Now there's news about another veteran quarterback, not as old, but somebody that looks like he's on his way out of Detroit, and that is Matthew Stafford. So the Colts, with the second best salary cap space right now in the NFL, so they're in really good position. Sort of like that's why you're hearing, okay, if Houston is going to trade Deshaun Watson, the Jets and the Dolphins make the most sense. They've got the draft capital, they have the cap space. Well, the Colts have the cap space. Draft capital, that's a little bit different, but they wouldn't have to give up, of course, as much as the Jets or Dolphins would have to give up for Deshaun Watson. That's because of age. How realistic is Matthew Stafford to the Colts?
That's tricky. I think it's as realistic as the Colts want it to be. And I think the general thought around the league with a lot of people is that he's an outstanding player who's just been stuck in that Detroit purgatory. And if you put him in a good organization like the Colts that has a balanced roster, good front office, good coaching staff, you could really do something with that. A lot of people consider him an elite quarterback.
I think he is.
Again, yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
If you weren't 33, I think I'd be, for him being 33 and having some of the injuries that he's had, I think it would be a no-brainer. I'm still very much in favor of the Colts going out and trading for him. I know the Colts aren't going to love getting rid of that draft capital, but the quarterback position is one of those positions where it's worth it. I do think it's realistic. It just depends what the Colts are thinking behind the scenes, what they can do in the quarterback market in the draft.
No question, they're going to try to go after Stafford. I think we think that's makes a lot of sense. But also, even if they can't land Stafford, you talked about, okay, maybe it's time for them to find a young quarterback in the draft. Either way, does that mean Brissett is gone?
No, that has actually been a very heavy topic of conversation among Colts fans lately. Is during his end of season press conference, Chris Ballard basically said, "Don't discount Jacoby Brissett either." I don't think he's their plan to start, but I think in a scenario where they could find nothing else, I think they know they have that option. But again, he's a free agent. Maybe he goes somewhere else.
All right, let's talk about some of the other key players on offense. Marlon Mack. Achilles injury week 1. We talked about the fact that the team did not pursue him for an extension when we talked about Mack before the season began. So unfortunately, this is what happens when you're not lucky enough to get the extension before the injury. So what do you think about Marlon Mack? Any chance that, first of all, what's his health status? Because at least it was a week one injury, which would lead you to believe that he should be ready to go for the beginning of the 2021 season. But any chance that he might be back?
Yeah, so we didn't really get a health update on him, but like you said, with it being a week one thing, the Achilles injury isn't really the death sentence it used to be for a football player. We saw a guy like Michael Crabtree, for example, has come back from it in less than a year, things like that. It's almost like an ACL timetable anymore. So I would imagine he would be on a normal timeline. I imagine he would be ready to go for next season. So Chris Ballard was asked about Marlon Mack at his end of season press conference, and you really didn't get a good impression one way or the other. I think they would like to have him back. He's not going to be the starter, obviously. You know, we
Yeah.
saw Jonathan Taylor is special. Marlon Mack would be a cog in the machine. But I think Chris Ballard acknowledges that Marlon Mack could get good money. He deserves a good contract. They just don't know that they are going to be the ones to get it. I think they'll let him test the market and see what it's like out there for him. If they want him back, then it's luckily for them that he's coming off an Achilles injury, because teams probably aren't going to be
No.
really eager to throw 10, 12 million
Nope.
a year at a running back coming off an Achilles. But with the season he had in 2019, it looks like that was the money he might have got, because he just ran for 1,000 yards and he looked really good.
Okay, now let's talk about Ty Hilton, who is getting up there in age, and it's starting to show a little bit. He had some. Well, first of all, there was some injury concerns. And that and that was something that occurred last year in 2019 when he missed some games. And this is a guy that has always been pretty durable. But then this season, the production's been down a little bit. Uh, you tell me. That's why you're on here. What's the status with T.Y. Hilton and whether or not you think he's going to be back?
Yeah, so he had a few games stretch there during the season that okay, so his season did not start off great.
No.
There was a couple drops in week 1, and then in week 2 he dropped a 40-yard touchdown, and there was a lot of questions about him after that. And the thing is, in this offensive system, they don't have a guy who's going to be the 150 target guy. They're not going to have a 100 catch, 1,500 yard, 10 touchdown guy. That's not how this system works. And we've seen that before with him. I mean, he led the league in receiving yards in 2016. So just not having Andrew Luck and not having Andrew Luck, his numbers were just going to go down. But it took a little bit to gel with Phillip Rivers. But then there was a few game stretch about midway through where he was playing out of his mind. He had like 4 or 5 touchdowns in 2 or 3 games, and he had, I think, 1 or 2 100-yard games. He just kind of looked like his old self again.
Okay.
So that kind of told me there, if he wants to be back and the Colts want him back, they'll get it done.
And Pascal, he's a restricted free agent, so he's probably not going anywhere.
He'll be back. He does everything. He is again. I keep saying all these guys are loved inside the building, but you're asking me about some of the most important players to the locker room. Everyone loves Zach Pascal. He does so many different things for them. He's actually one of the best blocking wide receivers in the
Yep.
league. So he is everything that the coaches and the front office love. So Pascal, I would be blown away if he wasn't back.
And you mentioned Pittman, so there's the future there. We talked about last offseason, the Colts need to get bigger, so Pittman came in, so that made a lot of sense. But Campbell, only 24 receptions in his first 2 seasons, another injury, the MCL week 2. So the Colts just can't count on him. It doesn't mean that he
Right.
won't finally get healthy and produce, but I'm sure they can't count on him. So, what's more likely, draft pick or free agent?
That's a good question. I could see both. I don't know. So they have some really expensive openings, right? They've got to get left tackle taken care of, quarterback taken care of. I really don't know, and edge rusher as well. I really don't know how eager they are to spend a lot of money on an outside player because they believe in building their roster from the inside out.
Yeah.
So I really just think it depends on what they do in free agency. If they wound up getting someone like Matt Stafford, then they might be inclined to try and go get Kenny Golladay for him,
Sure.
or Allen Robinson or Kenny Golladay. They both would fit this offense really well. So those are certainly options. It's another really deep wide receiver class in the draft this year. So there's really just no telling. If it doesn't happen in free agency, I would certainly expect it to happen at some point in the draft.
Okay. And a tight end, Burton's a free agent. Uh, and it's like these three guys are all good blockers, but none of them, there's not a clear number one that scares opposing defenses. Is that something the Colts are going to want to? Is that something that this offense needs, or are they okay with bringing Burton back and going with these three guys?
I think I'm not so sure Burton will be back.
Okay.
He was the third option behind Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox. Mo Alley Cox year by year is becoming what they've envisioned for him. He's the former basketball player, and he plays like that. He's the big bodied guy. They like to get it up to him high so he can out jump everybody and come down with it. And that's been his role. Jack Doyle, early in the season, it didn't look so great, and we thought maybe his role was going to be eliminated at some point. But him and Philip Rivers started connecting more later in the season. So I think the odd man out, if there was going to be one between those three, would probably be Burton. This is an offense that really likes tight end play. It's not uncommon to see 2-3 tight ends used very regularly. If there's a guy like Freiermuth, or I don't think the kid from Florida is going to be available when they pick. But there's going to be some options in the draft. I really think the type of tight end they're going to want to get, though, is the more joker field stretching type, because that's kind of what Trey Burton was supposed to be for him. Alley Cox and Doyle are really good blockers. You can use them out wide in the slot or on the line, but neither of them are like real burners, on the ground, especially Doyle.
Yeah.
He's more of a chain mover, and you can use Mo Alley Cox downfield, but he doesn't offer a ton after the catch. He's not a real fast guy.
But they think of signing a guy like Hunter Henry?
That would be very interesting. I think if they did that, he would be their number one tight end. They're not so married to Doyle or Alley Cox where they wouldn't do something like that. That's interesting, though. I would imagine they would be interested in exploring that option.
Okay.
Because again, they use 2 or 3 tight ends very regularly. But I think that would be a realistic option for them.
And you mentioned Costanzo. So he's retired, and this has been one of the most durable units in the NFL the last few seasons. Now they need to find a new left tackle. And Braden Smith becomes a free agent after the season, too. So he could have his contract. Another situation where he gets his contract renewed earlier than later, because he's a very underrated tackle. I know how good he's been, but right tackles sometimes they get lost in the shuffle, especially when you have a Quentin Nelson and a Costanzo on the team. But left tackle is going to be a priority, no question about it. So much so that, and once again, do you think this is something that they want to find some young left tackle to build around these veterans, or are they going to look at, hey, maybe we can get an older guy to come in here, give us a couple of years, and because we're trying to win a championship now?
I think what will happen is I think they'll sign some sort of safety net in free agency, because they have to have someone. I think Braden Smith is going to stay on the right side. There's been chatter about whether or not Quentin Nelson would move from guard to left tackle. because there was a point
Really?
during the season. Yeah, Nelson saw some snaps at left tackle during a game. They had a bunch of injuries at left tackle, and they were just like, we got to get the best 5 linemen out there. They've got a young guy like Danny Pinter who they can move around from guard to center. They got moving parts. What they're going to do is put the best 5 offensive linemen out there.
Okay.
We don't know what that looks like. I don't think it's necessarily going to be Nelson unless they feel like they have to.
Okay.
I think they'll sign a veteran. They'll probably sign a veteran who they would feel safe with playing out there. But I also expect it to be of premium importance in the draft.
Okay.
If they're sitting there at 21, the quarterback they want probably won't be there. And I think it's way more realistic that they take a tackle. Personally, I think tackle is the most likely option at 21, just because of the amount of them that should be available at that spot. Because the quarterbacks are going to fly off the board, I think, within the first 10 to 12 picks.
Sure.
And is Mac Jones a guy you want to take at 21? Maybe not. You'd probably rather have a left. Yeah, I think you'd rather have a left tackle. Samuel Cosme, Leatherwood, Slater. I think there's more options there at 21. So I can see them taking a safe veteran in free agency, and I could also see them drafting one early, because then they'll definitely have options going into the season. I don't know how realistic it is to throw big money at someone like Trent Williams. That would be cool. Trent Williams is a great left tackle, one of the best in the league, easily. But that's going to be very, very expensive. I think the most realistic option is what I said. To take someone who's safe in free agency, probably an older guy around 30. Jared Valdir worked out really well for them for a couple games. I don't know. He's been flip-flopping between retirement and playing for a while, but I think making those 2 moves makes the most sense to me.
All right. Now on defense, definitely, and you mentioned it before, the team needs edge rushers, and the team needs to get a little younger as well. Justin Houston's a free agent, Autry, Muhammad. So, and Houston had a really big year in his first year with the team in 2019. Not as dynamic this year, but he's getting older, and that's what happens. So, and Autry's been a pretty steady player. Definitely a great find for the organization, for Ballard, to be able to have a guy like this that what did he have? 10.5 sacks in his first 4 years with the Raider organization. And he's had 20 in 3 years with the Colts. So he's definitely found himself here. But again, you're also talking about a guy that's 31, Houston's 32. So again, no matter what, this is definitely going to be a priority early in the draft, right?
Yeah, I think so for sure. Unless they can do something in free agency like Carl Lawson, for example, Romeo Aquara, guys like that would fit the Colts system. Again, that's expensive. Edge rushers don't usually get to leave their team, but those unrestricted guys, especially guys from like the Bengals and Lions, they might want to go somewhere like Indy where they have a better chance of winning. So I think those are definitely options for the Colts, but the Colts will never be satisfied with the amount of pass rushers they have. So it's always an option in the draft. To me, the 3 most realistic positions for their first couple picks in the draft is offensive tackle, quarterback, and edge rusher. I expect an edge rusher to happen within the first 2 or 3 rounds. That they almost always like to do that. Because like you said, Houston is a free agent. Autry's a free agent. I think it's probably a little more realistic that Autry be brought back. They probably would like to have both back, just again as a safety net, but they're both north of 30 years old. Neither of them are going to give you gaudy sack numbers. Houston's snap total has dwindled, and when he's not getting sacks, he's not really getting to the quarterback and putting a ton of pressure on him. I think Autry, you're happy with starting him. He's productive, but you just need more consistency from some of these guys.
And you need younger, fresher legs that can play more snaps.
Yeah, they have Kamoko Toure and Ben Banogu, but Toure came back about midseason from a pretty devastating ankle injury he suffered the season prior. He's never really shown you more than just flashes. I think he looks really dangerous, but he's probably also nothing more than a designated pass rusher. He's kind of like a Yannick Ngakoue, like a less established Yannick
Hmm.
Ngakoue. He doesn't do much against the run. He's just a pass rusher. Ben Banogu was a healthy scratch pretty much all season. That's not to say he couldn't do something in year three, kind of like Tyquan Lewis did. Tyquan Lewis was a rookie in 2018, looked really good, did nothing just like Banogu in his second year. And then in his third year, Tyquan Lewis looked pretty good again. So the Colts have nothing they can really rely on as far as edge rushers go. So something almost certainly has to happen this offseason.
All right. And also, you take a look at the linebacking core because we don't have to talk about the interior of the defense, which is loaded right now for the Colts. But as far as the linebackers are concerned, Leonard, I mean, he is one of the best in the game. We know that. But Walker, the middle linebacker, is a free agent. Um, and what do you think? Because his play seemed to slip a little bit this past year, and Okariki's a pretty good player, but his game also appeared to slip a little bit. So, do you think it's? And I know this isn't I mean, when you have Leonard, he can do a whole lot. He can mask a whole lot of other issues within that unit. But do you think it's time to maybe add some more competition, or maybe even a fresh face or two on either side of Leonard?
So it might be tough for Walker to come back because honestly, he's had a lot of production. He's known as a really smart guy. He's had 100 tackle season before, so some other team might give him pretty decent money to be a for sure starter, and he might be he could be a pretty good fit in a 3-4 team as well. I think it's pretty likely that the Colts move forward with Darius Leonard and Bobby Okereke as the two primary linebackers.
Okay.
And in their scheme, the Sam linebacker really doesn't play very much at all
Okay.
because they're almost always in a sub package.
Right.
So the Sam linebacker is probably already on the roster, whether it's Zaire Franklin or EJ Speed. That's the most likely options to play next to them. But yeah, it's almost certainly going to be Leonard and Okereke, and that's if they can't bring back. They love Anthony Walker. Chris Ballard spoke really highly of him recently. He said, when he hangs him up, if he wants to be a scout, then he'll become a GM.
Right.
If he wants to be a coach, then he'll become a head coach.
Okay.
Anthony Walker's a really, really smart guy. But I just don't know if the money is going to be there this offseason. I don't think they would hate to have him back, but he might command more money than they're willing to spend.
All right, in the secondary, Xavier Rhodes. Wow, that was a big pickup. He was reunited with a couple of coaches that were with him in Minnesota, and maybe that seemed to help change the scenery because he didn't have a good 2019. But that was only a 1-year deal. So is he a priority to bring back?
I would think so. I mean, yes, he is a little older, but he was really good this year. Now, in 2017, he was known as one of the best corners in the league. He was an all-pro. There was the whole roads closed thing. 2018 and 19, Vikings fans were okay with him leaving. He comes back, or he comes to Indy. Like you said, he's reunited with Jonathan Gannon and Alan Williams, who were with him in Minnesota, and he looks really good again. With the standards for what gets you to the Pro Bowl nowadays, I wouldn't have been surprised for him to be named to the Pro Bowl this year.
Yeah.
He wasn't named to it, but he had a really good year.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Colts would like to have him back, but I think his contract is going to be really interesting because he's had an all-pro past. He had a downturn in his career, but then he bounced back to a pretty decent degree. So is his market going to be $12 million a year or so? If that's the case, it's probably going to be too rich for the Colts, I would imagine. But if we're looking at more 8 or 9 million a year, that may be more realistic. I
Doesn't
do
that
think
cause a big issue though, if they can't
Mhm.
bring him back because Rocky Sin hasn't developed yet?
Right.
So doesn't that become a bigger issue, and become then one of the top priorities all of a sudden?
Yeah. Cornerback is one of the priorities people talk about. It's probably the next up after
The top three.
quarterback, left tackle, and edge rusher. Like we said, cornerback is probably what you want to put more into. So Marvell Tell was probably going to factor in pretty healthily into that group this year, but he was a COVID opt-out. He'll be back to officially play his second season, or would be expected to in 2021. He looked like a nice little project his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
TJ Carey gave them, I think, a lot more than they expected. He saw some time when Rocky Sin was out. He looked pretty decent doing it. There was a couple times he gave up scores, but I think overall he was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, Xavier Rhodes, you really would like to have him back because it creates more depth issues if he's not there. But they're not going to give him a ton of money just because they need the position. They're going to have a value assigned to him specifically, I'm sure. And if the money is just too much for them, they won't do it. And Rocky Sin is not a bad player. He just he maybe didn't take that big second year step you would like to see, and he gets some penalties. He's not bad for this system, but you start to hear his name when he gets a little grabby. I do think they are still comfortable starting him. I don't think they're going to actively look for a replacement because cornerbacks kind of take a little while to develop as well. But no, like you said, Xavier Rhodes is important. They're not gonna make themselves so dependent on needing him. But I think they would like to have him back. Yeah.
And really, it just goes to show you how important it is for them to figure out if they're going to pursue Matthew Stafford, whether or not they get Matthew Stafford, because you would think they get him. That's going to take up a certain amount of cap space. Do they then go after a true number one? Does that take up more cap space? If they don't get Stafford and they don't go after a true number one receiver, then maybe all of that money goes to some of these other guys that we were talking about. Before I let you go, the coaching situation. Sirianni's gone. So how does that affect the coaching staff?
Yeah, so luckily Sirianni wasn't the play caller, so they're not looking to replace that. But he was really important in the building. He worked side by side with Frank Reich throughout the week, developing the game plan and the script and everything. He was really positive for player development. The receivers always seemed to have a little uptick with him. Andrew Luck had the best season of his career with him. Phillip Rivers turned things around under Sirianni. They got really good quarterback play out of Jacoby Brissett for about a half a season in 2019. He's demanding of the players, but he's really liked by them at the same time. He gets fiery. So he'll be someone that is tough to replace. But they have already named his replacement in Marcus Brady, who players really like him as well.
Now, speaking of Sirianni and Reich and the connection there, you have Carson Wentz. We haven't talked about him yet, but it's almost like before the Stafford stuff came along, there was a lot of, and there has been for the last couple of months, ever since Wentz has been benched. And the Colts have got cap space, and that's what was talked about. Could Carson Wentz get traded to the Colts? Would the Colts want a younger quarterback that played under Frank Reich? Is that possible? So you tell me, is that something that was never going to happen, especially now that Sirianni's in Philly? That's part of the reason he wanted to go there. It's a nice fit. He knows Wentz. Reich, I'm sure, is giving him some tips about Carson Wentz. But what do you think? Is that closed, or is there a possibility there as well?
I think there's always an outside possibility, but I think I mean, all the reports out of Philadelphia were that it was going to be Doug Peterson or Carson Wentz, right? Doug Peterson's out, so that kind of leads you to think Carson Wentz is there to stay.
Yeah.
And I think them hiring someone with such strong ties to Frank Reich also lends itself to the fact that Carson Wentz is going to stay, because Frank Reich could have told Sirianni all he ever needs to know. you know, here's some things I did to really help get the most out of Carson Wentz, because Wentz was an MVP candidate before he got hurt that year they won the Super Bowl. So I think Carson Wentz is going to be with the Eagles as far as I know.
Jake, I appreciate it. Colts.com. And you also have the podcast, right? When do you air that podcast?
I do. Yeah. So right now, I mean, it's kind of shifting gears a little bit with the season being over, but we release our episodes now. It's generally going to be every Thursday/Friday. It's the Believe in Colts podcast on the Believe Podcast Network. And that's BLEAV, not BELIEVE.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any particular reason why you spelled it that way?
No, it's part of the Believe Podcast Network. So that's not my name.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so that's
not your
the
network
name of the
yet.
Right, that's the name of the company.
All right, Jake, appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you definitely soon for sure. There's some big news coming out of Indianapolis at some point, and we'll look forward to talking to you when it happens.
Absolutely, buddy. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Jake.